page 56 in the New Testament in your pew Bibles. And I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Then Jesus began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at his gracious words that came from his mouth. And they said, "Is not this Joseph's son?" And he said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum.' And he said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine all over the world. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them, except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon. And there were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them were cleansed except Naaman the Syrian.' And when they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage, and they got up and they drove him out of town and led him to the brow of the hills on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Our second reading for this morning is taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And again, if you wish to follow, that's on page 161. I'm going to begin with verse 4 down through just the first phrase of verse 8. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I want all of you gentlemen for you to pay real close attention for just a moment. You can nod off after this, but which one of you gentlemen can tell me what is going to be the next big holiday? Don't mess this up. What is it? Valentine's Day. You have been warned. Valentine's Day, not this week, next week. I just thought maybe I should say that because I want to speak on this subject of love. I'm not sure why, but when I remember that whatever God is doing in my life, others may not be quite where I am in my walk with the Lord. Now, I need to make one thing really clear this morning. When the writers of the New Testament, including our Lord, he wasn't a writer, but the words that we hear from him, love is not an emotion, it's a behavior. And you will see that in each of these 8 statements that are here, or 8 or 9, however many, that it's something that love does. And we're all familiar with John 3:16, are we not? For God so loved the world that he gave. He did something. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying to your spouse, and I hope you will, or your children, or your grandchildren, I love you. Pastors ought to say that to their congregants once in a while. And by the way, it wouldn't hurt if you congregants once in a while would say that to your preacher. Just a hint. Love is kind. Love is kind. It's gentle and it's nurturing. Now, these statements that are here are the gold standard to which we all need to aspire. Because when I get done, if you go, none of these things are true, well, you've got a little work to do. Love is the first in the list of the fruits of the Spirit that God gives to us, but love is kind. Love is not envious. That is, love does not look at another person and say, he or she has a better car than I do. I'm just thankful for the cars that I have and that they are still working. Love is not envious of what others have. Love is not boastful. You know what that is. See what I have accomplished. Now, I've appreciated, I'm working with the session over at Highlawn, and I've appreciated that they refer to me as the Reverend Dr. Richards. No. But do not be envious of me. I'm not a doctor. I appreciate the accolade, but fake news, people. Or love is not arrogant. Notice who I am. The classic example of this is when one of the stories that Jesus told was that the Pharisee went into the temple to pray, and he said, Lord, I'm so thankful I'm not like this guy. Love is not rude. You know what rude is, don't you? Your spouse will tell you when you're being rude. Love is not a bully. Love does not demand its own way. It's not rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It's not about me. And it's not about you. Now, you are important. And I know sometimes when I preach a sermon like this that there are people who just, you know, they're so meek and you just don't hardly even know that they're around. But love does not insist on its own. It's not my way or the highway. I like this next one. Love is not irritable and resentful. You know, that feeling that rises up in your heart when somebody cuts you off. Ooh. Verse 6 says it does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Love is not happy when people stumble and fall, but we rejoice in the truth. Paul goes on. Love bears all things. It puts up with all things. Why? Because as I observe my own life, and as I may be observing your life in some encounters that we may have, I just realize that I may not be where you are in your spiritual walk, or you may not be where I am in my spiritual walk. So it bears all things. Love believes all things. Now, that does not take into account those phone calls that you get. You know the ones. Mr. Richards, you owe the IRS $562. And I go, I don't think so. It doesn't mean that kind of simplistic belief. It's not that. And how many of us have been caught off short every once in a while when I form an opinion about somebody that I know, and then when I really get to know them and find out what's going on in their lives, I'm ashamed sometimes. Love hopes all things. I want the best for my life, and I want the best for your life. I truly do want God's best for this congregation, as I do for all of the others that are without pastoral leadership at this time. It hopes for the best. It looks for the best. And let me just gently remind us this morning, these are the gold standards to which we must attain. You may not be here in many of these, but that's okay. We need to move towards a higher level of behavior. Love endures all things. For love's sake, I will put up with whatever inconveniences there may be in my life, because I know that there is something better at the end. And finally, love never ends. Now, having said all that, let me go back and just put a little bit of context into this. The believers in Corinth were those who believed that they all were very uniquely special. And in the beginning, when Paul is dealing with this congregation, he's saying, I know that among you are those who say, well, I'm following Paul, I'm following Cephas, I follow Apollos, the great preacher. And the really spiritual ones among them said, I'm following Jesus. And then Paul goes on at length in 1 Corinthians and other places to talk about the gifts of the Spirit. Now, we didn't read that first part. Give me just a moment to pull my little ribbon up here. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. I was going to bring my noisy gong, by the way. I forgot it. You can say amen. That's okay. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have 2 or 3 doctoral appointments, oh, I'm sorry, that's, I've added that. If I have all faith so that I can remove mountains and I do not have love, I am nothing. So that's why Paul goes on to list the characteristics of what love is. But love never ends. As for prophecies, Paul says after the end of verse 8, they will come to an end. As for they will cease, and as for knowledge, it will come to an end.